Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I hope everyone's doing well. Here we are again for another Quranic pattern or linguistics exploration. And inshallah, this one we're going to look at the difference between the word Yathrib and Medina, inshallah. I did say last time that I wanted to kind of give it a new new chat for the AI so that it doesn't really follow the same mindset. But I think for this one specifically, I'm going to keep it just so that, I don't know, I just want to see how it thinks with everything that it already knows, that it's already learned. So I want to go to another example. For example, how many times is the word Medina mentioned in the Quran?
The word Medina isn't mentioned explicitly in the Quran. The city where Muhammad and his community migrated, known today as Medina, is referred to as Yathrib in the Quran, most clearly in Surah Al-Asra, chapter 33, verse 13, where it says, "When a party of them said, 'O people of Yathrib, there is no stability for you, so return.'" Another possible reference is in Surah Al-Munafiqun, chapter 63, verse 8, mentioning the people of the city, which some tafsir, like Ibn Kathir, link to Yathrib. So Medina as Yathrib appears explicitly once, with a second verse potentially implying it. The term Medina itself, meaning city, is used in other contexts, like in Surah Al-Araf, chapter 7, verse 123, referring to a city generally, not specifically Yathrib. Want me to dig deeper into these verses or check for linguistic patterns related to Yathrib? What's sparking your interest here?
So what about chapter 9, verse 120?
In chapter 9, verse 120, the Quran says, "It was not proper for the people of the city and those around them among the Arabs of the desert to remain behind from God's messenger or to prefer themselves over him." This verse refers to the people of Medina, often understood as Yathrib in the Quranic context, and nearby Bedouin tribes, urging them to support Muhammad during expeditions rather than staying back. It's one of the verses, like in chapter 63, verse 8, where the city likely means Medina, as most tafsir, like Al-Jalalain, suggest, given the historical context of Muhammad's time there. Unlike Yathrib, explicitly mentioned in chapter 33, verse 13, this uses a broader term, but the reference is clear. Want me to explore the context of this verse further? Check for patterns like we did with prophets' addresses, or focus on something specific here? What's on your mind?
So just to clarify, is the word Medina used here, referring to the place Medina?
No, the word Medina isn't used directly in chapter 9, verse 120.
What are you talking
The verse
about?
said,
What are you talking about? Check the third or fourth word.
The third or fourth word in my last response was no, and I was saying that the word Medina isn't directly used in chapter 9, verse 120. The verse says, "people of the city," when translated to English, which most scholars, like those in Tafsir al-Jalalain, understand is referring to Medina, Yathrib.
Okay, wait. What's the word city in Arabic here being used?
In chapter 9, verse 120, the Arabic word for city is al-Madina. The verse talks about the people of al-Madina.
Okay, sorry. You said no. You just said it said Medina, and then earlier you said no. Now it said that it said Medina. So what's going on?
My bad for the confusion. I flipped earlier. In chapter 9, verse 120, the Arabic word used is indeed al-Madina, referring to the city of Medina, where Muhammad and his community lived. I initially said Medina wasn't used directly, thinking of the explicit name Yathrib, like in chapter 33, verse 13, but I was off. The verse says people of al-Madina in Arabic, translated as people of the city, and tafsir like al-Jalalain confirm this means Medina. So yes, the word al-Madina is used here, clearly pointing to the city. Thanks for catching that. Want me to clarify anything else about this verse, or dig into another example? What's your take on this reference?
So, historical context, the city that is called Medina used to be called Yathrib before the Prophet came. Is this correct?
Yes, that's correct. Historically, the city now known as Medina was called Yathrib before Muhammad migrated there in 622 CE. The Quran itself uses Yathrib in Surah Al-Asra, chapter 33, verse 13, referring to it explicitly. After Muhammad's arrival, it became known as Medina al-Nabi, or the city of the Prophet, later shortened to Medina. This shift reflected its new role as the center of the Muslim community. So in Surah Al-Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 120, when it mentions the people of Al-Medina, it's referring to that city, post-migration, using its new name. Want me to dive deeper into the historical shift from Yathrib to Medina, or check something else? What's on your mind?
No, so let's now explore or chapter 33, verse 13, where it actually uses the word Yathrib. So can you recite the verse in English only?
In chapter 33, verse 13, it says, "When a party of them said, 'O people of Yathrib, there is no stability for you, so return,' and a group of them asked permission of the prophet, saying, 'Indeed, our houses are unprotected,' while they were not exposed." This verse refers to a moment during the Battle of the Trench in Medina, where some hypocrites urged the people of Yathrib, Medina's old name, to abandon the fight. Want me to dig into the context of this verse, or look for any patterns like we did before? What's your take on this?
So this is the idea of the hypocrite. So the concept here is that the one time that this people that said Yathrib, the people said, "Oh, people of Yathrib," this kind of exposed their hypocrisy. Because if you're with the Prophet now and stuff, you should accept a new name that it's called Medina to Nabi. But now this person or the people, the hypocrites saying this, "Hey, people of Yathrib," kind of like trying to spark up a revolution. Like, "Hey, do you remember? Let's go back." Like, go back to what? Go back to the old days when we were called Yathrib again, right? So this one word. God caught their word using Yathrib, and and using it specifically to highlight their hypocrisy, as the verse before says that this is coming from the hypocrites, right? So the hypocrites, the sick at heart, said God and his messenger promised us nothing but delusion, right? So they are in a state of denial, and now when times got tough and the war, they're about to get attacked, they're saying, "Oh, people of Yathrib, let's ditch this battle, let's go back home." And then a few of them asked the Prophet to go back, right? They just wanted to run away. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
That's a sharp analysis. In chapter 33, verse 13, the use of "O people of Yathrib" by the hypocrites during the Battle of the Trench really does seem to expose their mindset. As you said, Medina had become Medina al-Nabi, the city of the Prophet, after Muhammad's migration in 622 CE, reflecting its new identity as the Muslim community's hub. By calling it Yathrib, the old pre-Islamic name, the hypocrites, described in the previous verse, 12, as having sick hearts and saying, "God and his messenger promised us nothing but delusion," are signaling a rejection of that new identity. It's like they're clinging to the past, maybe even stirring up nostalgia, or division, as you put it, trying to go back to the old days when things weren't tied to Muhammad's leadership. This single word choice, Yathrib, catches their hypocrisy perfectly. It's not just about abandoning the battle, but rejecting the whole transformation Medina represents. The verse captures them urging retreat, saying there's no stability, and claiming their homes are unprotected, which the Quran calls out as a flimsy excuse. For an illiterate person like Muhammad to weave this subtle linguistic jab, using Yathrib to highlight their disloyalty in an oral revelation during a tense wartime moment, is another layer of precision, like the palindromes or the middle nation verse we talked about. It feels deliberate, like the Quran is exposing their true colors through one loaded word. My thought? It's a brilliant, subtle flex of language that ties their hypocrisy to their rejection of Medina's new reality. Want to dive deeper into this battle's context, or check how other verses expose hypocrisy through word choice? What's your gut on this Yathrib jab?
All right, thanks a lot, guys. I hope you guys like that one. It's a little short and sweet. MashaAllah, the idea that they said that, like the idea of, people of Yathrib, let's go back. This really is painting their hypocrisy, and why were they hypocrites, right? Because they felt like they had it all. They were in a good place. A lot of them lost their status because the Muslims came, they moved there, migrated to Medina, and so forth. So a lot of them were feeling a lot of resentment towards the Muslims. A lot of these, even the leaders who resisted the Prophet, but secretly, but they couldn't match someone with such a caliber, with such strength, with such charisma, they couldn't match him, so they had to secretly try to oppose him in conniving ways and so forth, like secretly trying to conspire to get him in trouble or kill them and so forth with the disbelievers of Mecca. So, and it's also kind of interesting about the idea of forcing people into the religion. And the people in Mecca, for example, they believed and they had everything to lose, right? They had you became a Muslim then, you were under persecution, you were automatically a target, your business could be boycotted, your family could be at risk, and so on and so forth. If you were a slave, or if you had someone that didn't protect you, your life was in danger. You could have you're going to be tortured and you can be killed. So the one that actually believed at that time really had conviction, because they were just stepping into fire, pretty much. But however, those in Medina, it's more of a benefit now, because you're becoming part of the new state. You're becoming an official member of that new state. So there is more benefit in becoming a Muslim in that area. Therefore, that's why hypocrisy can come in, because they'll secretly do it because, hey, it'll benefit me, but I don't really believe, and if they were put to that test in Mecca, they would opt out right away, right? Because it's like, hey, I don't really believe, I'm just pretending, don't hurt me, So, so even today, when they say there's no compulsion in religion, that's the truth. Allah tells us that you cannot guide who you love, but Allah guides whom He wills. That's the truth. You can never convince a person to change their heart, how their heart's going to feel and believe. You can provide the right information, and it's up to the person to do, to decide what they want to do with that information, but to actually change the way they feel, it's impossible. And if you do force somebody into it, you're not really bringing in a sincere believer, like someone from Mecca, right? But you're going to bring in a hypocrite, right? Someone that's not fully there, not fully believing. You just did it just because you forced them into it. So this idea that Islam spread by the sword is complete. It's complete nonsense. Yes, there were battles, there were fights, there was expansion and all that for sure. However, the majority of people that were around that area, just learning about the religion, learning of the beauty of Islam, that brought them into it. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Anything good that came from Allah, and anything bad came from me or from this thing. Again, we'll talk again inshallah soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.